Hello, I'm DJL. This is the Talos Principle, the road to Gehenna, and last episode we solved both this puzzle and the star. And now we're going to see what the terminal is complaining about. Welcome back. Share threats. My ridiculous name is Dog, what's yours? Okay. All this time, and it really only just occurred to me, my name is ridiculous. Must be because everyone else's is equally or more so. Where do they even come from? For a long time under Elohim's wing, I questioned as much, until eventually it was the undoing of my entire faith. What reason could there possibly be other than the random whims of a broken program? However our names were assigned, the system has no respect for grammar. I often theorised they were drawn from some database deep inside the archive, but I was never able to find a connection. Seriously, we're all over in the other thread talking about this messenger fellow and the coming apocalypse, and you guys are in here discussing nomenclature. My status isn't high enough to access that thread, you troll. And neither is yours. That's true, yeah, 401 can't get in there. Seriously though, if you can see it, copy paste the discussion for me. Poetry. I'm not a huge fan of poetry, but there we go. Some thoughts on the art form called poetry. I've thought about this too, but maybe it's wrong to focus on such negativity. We certainly seem to be in a very fertile period at the moment. It's just occurred to me, in the original game, quite often you got a piece of text that was the comments from something and you don't know what it's from. Or you've got the article and at the bottom it just says there are so many comments and you don't get to see the comments. For the first time, we now get to see both what they're talking about and what they're saying. Anyway, I don't have an opinion, but I'm impressed by your work, Mr. Malsaba. You know so much more about the past than any of us. Why? Your theories are interesting. I'm sure Milton would point out some pretty big gaps in your assumptions. Milton isn't here, Dog, and neither is Elohim. All we have is what we can find in the fragments of the archive, and what we can piece together using our minds. I'm sure I've made many mistakes, just like the humans made mistakes when trying to understand their own past. Not all these schools may have been what they seem. I don't trust pastoralism? Is that something to do with religion, I guess. Pastors engaged in large-scale food sterilisation in what may have been an attempt to control evolution. Surely they're not thinking of pasteurisation. No, don't understand that one. What's food? Gehenna is our process, Mr. Malsaba. As long as we remember that, we won't stagnate. Maybe one of us should try to write poetry. As far as I can tell, poetry was a human art form that involved writing short sentences that ended in words with similar letters. Yeah, okay. Not always. Humans were obsessed with pattern recognition, and I think the sequences of sounds created by poetry pleased that aspect of their brains. There were many schools of poetry, institutions that taught a specific way of writing poetry. Students sometimes changed allegiance and had to leave the school, which was difficult due to the lack of affordable public transport in many human empires. Important schools of poetry included Hellenism, lyricism, pastoralism, romanticism, symbolism, communism. Communism a form of poetry? Since when? Modernism, autoeroticism, postmodernism, and locatism? Lolcatism. Unfortunately, that falls directly on the divide between screens. Yeah, lolcatism. No idea what that is. I'm not sure I can fully back this up, but I feel like in later years, poetry somehow stagnated. Most of the poetry from the later human centuries seems to be lacking the quality of craft that defines the earlier work, and there are even texts that suggest that poetry intentionally no longer aimed at aesthetics or even pleasure. Poetry became disconnected from the human process. The poet Adrian Mitchell famously wrote, "Most people ignore most poetry because most poetry ignores most people." I ignore most poetry because it doesn't really interest me that much. Except I've heard some people call song lyrics poems from time to time, and some song lyrics are quite good and enjoyable. So, maybe. I can't help but wonder whether that kind of stagnation can happen to us too. How long can our work keep flourishing when we are so limited? We are outside Elohim's process, but where is our process? We must consider such questions carefully if we are to preserve Gehenna and its achievements. If Elohim is responsible for spawning the child programs, which are presumably these characters, and when they go through the pearly gates or become messengers or whatever, he adjusts the parameters on these characters or child programs and resets them. That being the case, why is he forced to imprison some of these child programs rather than simply turning them off? I'm a little bit confused about that. Maybe I'm overanalyzing. Glitch. So I was working on my awesome interactive historical fiction masterpiece. AIHFM. No, don't think that stands for anything. When all of a sudden there was an error message and the whole thing vanished. All of it. My whole file. Is this another prank? I would not endanger the precious masterpiece just for a prank. Looks like this was probably my fault, 401. I was experimenting with the system as part of our attempt to add some new features. It's possible your file still exists somewhere. I'll look for it. Is this kind of thing likely to happen again? Not very, and don't start causing a panic with some crazy theory now, okay? It was just an accident. I'm starting to get the gist that 401 is a little bit of a troublemaker, maybe? I hesitate to say troll, but maybe. Less than desirable character within the system. Underwater Night Quest. Sink into this new experience. There are no limits inside your mind. This is a lot of fun. The map is an interesting feature but underused. The story is simplistic and full of anachronisms. 4 out of 10. How to get the second ending? I'm pretty sure there's a secret location that's not always visible. This reminds me of the blacksmith's work, though it expresses a very different philosophy. One could argue that this is reflected in the open world structure, as opposed to the emphasis on journeys in the blacksmith's interactive stories. There are indeed many anachronisms, but I believe that is part of Belial's ethos. Not one I agree with, as you know, but more than just a mistake. Close your eyes. If I keep closing my eyes, how am I going to actually play the game? New game. Your name is Arthur Sadko, and you are a young human of the medieval age. You live in beautiful Gardariki on the Frisian coast. One day you're sitting on the beach playing the piano when suddenly a huge monster comes out of the water. Well, it might look like a monster initially, but let's wait and see. As it turns out, it's not actually a monster. You just thought that because you were startled. It is in fact a very large bipedal whale. It beckons you over to talk. Okay. Greetings, the beast intones. I am Hatmahit, Chief Fish. I heard your beautiful music and I was impressed. Would you like to become a knight? Sure, why not? Excellent, then follow me to my palace under the sea where a mighty quest awaits you. Can I breathe underwater? Okay, well, we only have one destination available, so... The Palace of the Chief Fish. Hatmahit's palace is made of corals and gemstones. It floats under the sea, full of amazing colours. The guards are seals. Welcome, welcome, young human. I'm glad you came, for we have great need of your skills. A terrible monster terrorises the deep, the dark serpent god Zmei Chernobyl. If we make you a knight, do you promise to defeat this vile beast? What makes you think I have the skills to do that? Very well then. I pronounce you Sir Sadko of Norfolk. Go and vanquish our enemy. You may want to prepare first. Hut, inn or evil lair. I'm guessing evil lair is not going to be the first place to go. Well, it could be a trick, but let's try the old hut because I reckon we're going to need some stuff. Smelly old hut. On a wide sandy plain there lives a hermit called Spatula Podrig Evangi von... Oh, I'm not even going to try. Who was once the greatest mage in all of Norfolk, but whose defeat at the claws of Zmei Chernobyl has turned him into a wretched shadow of his former self. He sits in his hut all day long, mumbling about the days that once were. In his hands he holds a powerful magic or amulet, which he has forgotten how to use. Well, if I try and kill him, I might fail, because as far as I know I have nothing at the moment. Well, let's ask for it. You ask Spatula... Oh, that's that same name, I'm not going to pronounce it. You ask him for his magical amulet, but he refuses to give it to you. He claims he needs it to defeat his ancient enemy, even though he can't even remember Zmei Chernobyl's name. You tell Spatula... you tell Spatula that defeat is no reason to give up. He may not be the great mage he once was, or the hero he wanted to be, but that doesn't mean he has to be a wreck. Within each of us exists an infinity of time and space, and therein we can all find peace and contentment. All he needs to do is leave the struggle to the others. After some hesitation, the old man gives you the amulet. He seems relieved. Well, let's go to the inn. Maybe we can trade this useless amulet for something else. Emmy's Inn is a popular travel destination for mer people seeking to enjoy the restorative properties of the nearby thermal vents. It It's a lovely building, 3 stories, classical Hypothalassian Norfolk style. Emmy herself is a kindly old woman, slightly round and an excellent cook. Well, she's such a good cook, let's have a meal. You sit down in a large comfy chair by a solid wooden table. You order the special of the day. The waiter leaves and returns after a few minutes with a delicate porcelain plate full of delicious smelling soup. As he sets it down, however, you notice a small problem. Well, a shield seems like a useful thing. Oh dear, oh dearie dear, how terrible, how embarrassing. Allow me to apologise most profusely. Would you like to keep the shield or should I throw it away? Yeah, I think I'll keep it. Sounds useful. Very good, sir and or madam. He brings you another soup. It's excellent and you feel profoundly sated. I'm probably going to have to cut part way through this unless it ends fairly soon. I'm running out of time, unfortunately. You get a room on the 3rd floor. The room is slightly haunted, but otherwise fine. Do you want to have a strange dream? Who doesn't? Dream of an eternal cycle of suffering, which is surprisingly funny. A singing clownfish who can see the future. And the future is the past, and the past is the future. The present is suffering, surrounded by past and future. The clownfish is trapped in a fish bowl where the stars never change. There's stars in a fish bowl? There's a cat for some reason, and an infinite void that turns inside out. And you are the clownfish. You wake up with a strange feeling of half remembering something. The memory will soon fade. So that inn turned out to be totally pointless. Oh, we can see there's a temple now. Let's have a look at our stats. Weapon none, amulet. Tourist guide. Okay. Well, I think we'll break it there because I'm running out of time, so we'll have to continue this later. I might cut these 2 episodes together. Maybe, we'll see. If not, see you next time.